In this video, I'm going to be telling you about the top 10 best fruits and Blox Fruits for grinding to help you reach max level in 2024. And if you're going to enjoy today's video, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe. For this list, we're going to be going from the bottom to the top. So the very first fruit we got here is the Smoke Fruit. And the reason why this is actually the number 10 spot is because of the money which it costs, which makes it very affordable for new players to actually use. So it might not actually be in the top 10 for grinding, but since it's super cheap, it's honestly one of the best options for people who only have access to the Smoke Fruit thus far, and that's why it is on this list. So here are the fruit statistics. The Smoke Fruit is an elemental fruit, which means it is automatically good for grinding because once you can hit a certain level, enemies slash NPCs will not actually be able to attack you anymore, making farming really easy. This fruit, also not to mention, only costs 100,000 belly or 250 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer, and this fruit is honestly pretty good as every one of its abilities I'm about to tell you can actually hurt a sea beast, which makes this fruit actually really good for sea beast hunting. First up, we got the Z ability, which is actually called the Smoke Slam, which is an ability that can actually rarely be dodged by instinct. Then next up, we also have the X ability, which is called the Smoke Blast, which does amazing damage if the enemies stay inside the AoE, and he also has a decent stun. Next up, we got the C ability, which is actually called the Smoke Liberation, and this ability actually provides a good stun and a very quick startup time, making it decent for even PvP. And the last ability we got here is the F ability, which is called the Smoke Bomber, and this ability can actually deal damage infinitely as long as the user is not actually hit by any of the NPCs or of course enemies, which is really meaning that you can only really get hit by some NPC abilities or guns that will actually be able to attack you, and enemies with guns are actually a rare thing to see in the game as it is. And overall, it is effective for grinding as long as you deal damage without being hit. Next up on our number list at the number 9 spot is the Dough Fruit. I'm obviously talking about the V1, and if you're wondering why it is so low on this list, is because this is one of the best fruits for PvP, especially once you get it to V2. But of course, this video is a grinding video on how to, of course, grind as fast as possible with your fruits. So this is why this fruit is actually a lot lower. And anyways, the Dough Fruit is an elemental fruit that costs a total of 2.8 million belly or 2,400 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer, which means NPCs won't be able to harm you at a certain level. Here are some non-awakened abilities, because this is what you'll start out with having if for some reason you decide to start to grind with the Dough Fruit. The first ability is the Z ability, which is called the Fried Dough, and this ability actually has a pretty good AoE. Now the next ability we have on our list is the X ability, which is called the Sticky Dough, and it possesses auto aim when the user actually aims near an enemy, which is actually similar to God Human's C ability. The next ability is the C ability, which is called the Carved Dough, and actually has a pretty good ability and also does decent damage and a slight stun. The next ability is the V ability, which is actually called the Restless Dough Barrage, which has a high stun damage and can actually move enemies trapped in an attack animation slightly. And the last unawakened ability we have is the Roller Donut, which has a decent speed and actually climbs slopes really fast, and the speed is always maintained even if the user has low HP. Now overall, you can grind with this fruit mostly because it is an elemental fruit, but otherwise I would not recommend it. Next up on our list at the number 8 spot, we have the T-Rex fruit, which is actually not an elemental fruit, but this fruit is still a great fruit to use for grinding, so it is made it to our number 8 spot. This fruit actually has a unique thing called the Fury Meter, which means the user starts off with 0% Fury Meter bar when spawned, but when transformed, the user receives a 33% defense buff, increased dash range, and 20% gain for jump boost. The Fury Meter does need to be filled though to transform into the actual T-Rex, which can be done by using your other abilities. Next up, the T-Rex fruit actually has an ability called the Prey Mark, which during transformation, your attacks will actually apply a mark to your hit enemy. The farther away they are from you, the higher the tick damage, which it actually does on the downside during a constant amount of Fury Meter, but hey, this does mean you can actually attack multiple enemies at once, which means it's great for grinding. And here's the rest of the abilities the T-Rex fruit actually provides. The Tab, which is just a hit ability, which actually does have a decent hitbox. The Z ability, which is called the Tail Swipe, which has 2 hitboxes. One hitbox is actually close range swipe, and the second is a pair of the green jaws with a generally large range. The next ability, X, is actually called the Predatory Screech, and you can actually hold down the move, dealing more damage and actually pulling enemies in. It can also knock enemies far once the move is over. It is actually a good combo starter and extender. Another ability, which is the C ability, is actually called the Hunter's Range, and it actually has medium damage. The next ability, which is the V ability, which is actually called the Reptilian Scales, which actually summons meteors, which deals low damage but can also disrupt nearby enemies or players. And it actually covers the borders of the screen and fire, includes any players nearby as well will actually get this effect. And the last ability is called the Gigantic Leap, and it is the F ability, and it actually does damage and also knocks enemies up, which is actually similar to God Human's X ability and does decent AoE. Now overall, this fruit is good for grinding, I'd say, because of just the vast amount of abilities it actually does give give you, and it actually has a lot to offer, but of course it is not the best fruit on this list, especially when it costs 2.7 million belly and 2,350 Robux. Next up on our list for the number 7 spot, we actually have the ice fruit, which is actually pretty high up on this list, but it is actually an uncommon fruit, but it doesn't stop it from being good for grinding, and it does cost a total of 350k belly and 750 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. This fruit was added during the game's release on January 16th, 2019, and has undergone some changes. Like the dough fruit, the ice fruit actually does have a V2, but that is actually not what makes it super good. Now, starting with the unawakened abilities, the ice spear, which is the Z ability, is actually a simple ability where you can actually shoot out a bunch of ice crystals. Ice surge, which is the X ability, allows you to shoot out a huge ice blast from the floor. The Ice Bird, which is the C ability, if you hit somebody with the bird, it actually completely freezes them and stops them from moving. And the Glacial Epoch, which is the V ability, which deals damage to everything around it. On top of the elemental immunity that all the elemental fruits have, the Ice Fruit actually has 2 different passives that you can actually use. Walking on Water, which is good, but it's not practically useful for grinding, and the Ice Trident, which is actually incredibly good for grinding because it actually gives you a fruit plus a sword, and you have abilities and a passive attack that you can constantly use. Unlike most fruits, which aren't good for grinding due to the inability to spam attacks, the ice fruit allows you to spam attacks as much as you want. This is probably one of the best passive abilities in the entire game. Moving on to the number 6 spot, we actually have the light fruit, and this is actually very good for the same reason as the ice fruit. The light fruit also has a passive ability, which I will be telling you about just in a minute. The light fruit actually costs a total of 650k belly or 1,100 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. Just like the ice fruit, this also has an awakened version. Now let's start with the passive ability. The passive ability allows for this fruit, which is called the light spear, and this is a pretty cool looking ability, and actually works the same as the ice fruit. It's just an extra sword that you can get and you can use whenever you want. Now let's start with the unawakened abilities. The light ray, which is the Z ability, actually allows you to shoot a light beam out from your foot, dealing a decent amount of damage. The barrage of light, which is the X ability, you can actually have you beam someone from the sky and they can't even hit you. The reflection kick, which is the C ability, can actually have you teleport into the sky and slam into the floor with a huge kick. The sky beam barrage, which is the V ability, which actually launches a bunch of light meteors. And the light fly, which is the F ability, which allows you to actually use one of the most popular movement abilities in the entire game, and it's actually the fastest if you don't count the portal fruit. It's pretty self-explanatory. You can turn into a light beam and you can fly in whatever direction you use, but you are locked in place with the V1. Overall, the light fruit is actually highly effective for grinding due to its vast range of abilities and excellent passive skills, and that's why it is number 6 on our list today. Next up on our list is the Venom Fruit at number 5. The Venom Fruit is a mythical fruit that does cost a total of 3 million belly or 2,450 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. This ability also has a really overpowered transformation, but let's start off with the basics. The Poison Daggers, which is the Z ability, you can actually shoot out a bunch of poison blobs that deal a decent amount of damage. The Noxious Shot, which is the X ability, which shoots out a huge poison blob that poisons your enemies over time. The Toxic Fog C ability creates a huge fog that follows you, and if anybody stands in it, it deals a decent amount of damage to them. The Transformation, which is the availability, you can turn into a giant venomous cobra with the 3 different heads, resembling a Godzilla monster. And the Serpent's Wrath, which is the F ability, you can move around with the serpent's head. And an interesting fact about this ability is that if you have lower health, you actually move faster with it. And it actually makes you wonder how fast you'd go if you had a 1 HP. Now, moving to the transformation abilities, the Poison Daggers spews out poison all over the place, dealing a decent amount of damage to everyone standing in it. The Noxious Shot actually upgrades to shoot out a bunch of different blobs, dealing a huge amount of damage. The Toxic Fog upgrades into a huge toxic mist that deals much more damage than before and makes it hard for people to see when they're actually standing in it. The Serpent's Wrath, you can actually fly around a lot faster and drop poison below you, dealing damage to anything that you walk into or anything underneath you, which is actually kind of similar to the Smoke Bomber ability. But overall, the Venom Fruit is one of the best grinding fruits in the whole game, and that's actually why I listed the Awakened abilities here, because it just even gets better than what it already was before, so this really does show that this does deserve to be the number 5 spot. Next up on our list is the number 4 spot, which also might be controversial, and it is the Kitsune Fruit. Now, while this is one of the best fruits in the game overall, this is a grinding fruit tier list at the end of the day. The Kitsune Fruit actually costs a total of 8 million belly or 4,000 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. And starting with the basics, the starter ability, which is similar to the T-Rex's F ability, actually allows you to deal a large amount of damage to everything around you if you do spam this. The Cursed Enchantment ability, which is the Z ability, allows you to shoot out a bunch of Kitsune projectiles. The Tails of Burning Agony, which is the X ability, allows you to shoot other projectiles to track your enemies. The Foxfire Dispersal, which is the C ability, allows you to actually shoot out a bunch of huge projectiles that deal damage to whatever it lands on. And for the Transformation, which is the V ability, it actually lets you to turn into a whole entire Kitsune. And obviously a fun fact about this is that the Kitsune actually means fox in Japanese. And of course you have the Wild Assault ability, which is your movement ability, which allows you to fight people or enemies or NPCs, which is actually really good. And this ability is actually really good for it. It's basically where you just kind of claw around and everything. Now moving on to the transformation abilities, because when you transform into Kitsune, you get a whole new kit. You get the Curse Enchantment, which is the Z ability that allows you to deal a lot more damage, which of course is on the basic, but it just does more damage here. The Tails of Burning Agony, which is your X ability, changes to where you can actually charge your enemy, grab them, and slam them into the ground. The Foxfire Dispersal, which is your C ability, upgrades to shoot out a beam with all your 5 tails, dealing a significant amount of damage. And the Wild Assault, which is your movement ability, remains the same but does a lot more damage, making it pretty overpowered. And overall, the Kitsune Fruit is highly effective for grinding due to its vast range of abilities and excellent damage potential, and not to mention it also has really good movement. The next fruit we have on this list for the number 3 spot is the Mammoth Fruit. This fruit was added relatively recently in update 20, and it costs an overall of 2.7 million belly or 2,350 Robux from the Blox Fruits dealer. This fruit also has a passive ability called the Prehistoric Jump, and when you actually transform, you can jump into the sky and crash down into the floor, dealing a lot of damage. And starting with the abilities, for the Ancient Cutter, which is your Z ability, you can actually shoot out 3 different sword slashes. The True Prehistoric, which is the X ability, you can actually dash into your enemy and slam them into the floor. The Colossal Crush, which is your C ability, this ability does the same thing as True Prehistoric, oddly enough. And the Stampede, which is your F ability, which without even the transformation, you can jump into your enemy, which is pretty cool. Now, moving on to the transformation abilities, you actually have the passive M1 ability, which works kind of just like the Buddha Fruit, which allows you to hit your enemies without them being able to hit you because of how big you are. This passive ability is also similar to the Leopard's Fruit M ability when transformed. It actually includes 2 different slashes and 1 big roar, dealing a decent amount of damage to everyone around you. Now, the Ancient Cutter, which is your Z ability, is upgraded to shoot out 5 different slashes instead of 3, dealing a lot more damage. The True Prehistoric Punch, which is your X ability, deals much more damage than its untransformed version. The Colossal Crush, which is your C ability, allows actually more damage than its untransformed counterpart. And the Stampede, which changes to allow you to start charging down, and as long as you hold down the key, this ability is unlimited, making it very effective for grinding. It is difficult for enemies to hit you while charging into them though. Overall, the Mammoth Fruit is actually incredibly good for grinding due to its powerful abilities and the powerful advantage provided by its transformation skills, and that's why it is on the number 3 spot. Now moving on to the next fruit, which has actually made it to 2nd place on this list today, is actually the Magma Fruit. Currently in the game, this is the 2nd best fruit for grinding due to its overpowered V2 version, which is even great for sea beast hunting. This fruit costs a total of 960,000 belly or 1,300 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. Now, starting with the V1 abilities, you have the Magma Clap for Z, which is just in a basic attack where you just clap your hands together. The Magma Eruption, which is the X ability, allows you to spawn a Magma Puddle, which is pretty good for attacking enemies and doing damage to them. The Magma Fist, which is your C ability, you can actually shoot out a huge blob of magma. Then the Magma Meteors as well, which is your V ability, which you can shoot out a bunch of magma blobs, making it pretty decent to attack for V1. Then you also have the Magma Floor as well, which is your F ability, which you transform into a floor of lava. However, this is quite useless since your enemies can still hit you in this form for whatever reason. It's probably one of the worst movement abilities in this entire game. Now, moving on to the Awakened version, which basically makes this fruit one of the best fruits in the entire game. You have the Magma Shower, which is your Z ability, which you can spam a bunch of magma blobs, and these blobs stay behind and constantly deal damage to any enemy standing in them. Similar to the continuous poison effect, Volcanic Assault, which is your X ability, the only ability of this fruit that affects only 1 person. However, it does actually leave behind magma blobs, so if the enemy stands in them, they take continuous damage, which is good obviously for grinding. And you have the Great Magma Hound, which is your C ability. You can shoot out a huge magma blob that deals a decent amount of damage. And you have the Volcanic Storm, which is your V ability, which you can actually charge up a huge blob of magma and slam it into the ground several times, creating a massive blob. And if your enemy is standing in that, consider them basically dead because they are not surviving that. And of course you have the Beast Ride, which is your F ability, which you can control a magma beast. And this can be used as an attack because once you get off the beast, it launches toward wherever you're looking at, dealing a lot of damage. damage. Overall, the Magma Fruit is exceptionally good for grinding due to its powerful abilities and persistent damage effect of its magma blobs. And of course, like I said, it's the best fruit in the game for sea beast hunting. And we have finally made it to the #1 spot on this list, which I guess you guys can probably already tell what this last fruit is going to be. It is the Buddha fruit, and I'm sure a lot of you guys saw this coming, as it is widely known as the best grinding fruit in the entire game, and it costs a total of 1.2 million belly or 1,600 Robux from the Blox Fruit dealer. I don't even need to tell you guys about the abilities because they're honestly really useless. The only reason the Buddha fruit is good for grinding is because when you transform, it increases the range you can actually hit your enemies by 8 times of your normal radius. This means you can destroy them without them even being able to touch you. So the only ability you want to be using for this fruit is the transformation ability. You ideally don't even want to be putting the stat points into any other abilities, because when you're using the Buddha fruit, if you end up getting this fruit, consider yourself one of the luckiest players in the entire game. So if you did go on to enjoy today's video, please make sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. And if you do want to talk to me, please feel free to join my Discord, which is going to be linked in the description and in the comment section. And without further ado, I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.